Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, stay with us as the Suns get set to shine.
Perry to Gar. Here's the jump shot.
Comes to Marley, a long three. He got it! He got it! Into Booker. Here's the three. Suzanne! Another Sir Charles, and he flies in for a wham, bam, slam. Bravo time! He got it! Suzanne! Oh, brother!
Welcome to 7 Seconds or Less, a podcast about the NBA and the Phoenix Suns. My name is Max McCauley, and I am joined, as always, by my co-host. His name is David Nash. David, it's been 2 weeks. I was terrified that during this time off, the Suns would fall off and leave us with a depressing podcast, but quite the opposite has happened.
We're back, Max. We're back physically with the podcast, and the Suns, at least for now, appear to be back and as you said, not failing us just yet. So I'm pretty excited to get stuck into this one after our little break, to be honest, which straight off the top, congrats again while we're on the line with each other on the recent wedding. And the Suns have given us some stuff to talk about after our little break here, Max.
Thank you so much, and also thank you for getting me a wedding present, you and your wife. Amazing. If you don't follow me on Twitter, you didn't see this, but David and his wife were so kind as to do that. It was amazing. David, what a podcast host and a great friend.
Shouts to Scott Howard for the assist on that one as well, if he's listening.
That's funny. I assume the address?
Yep.
Makes sense. All right, but for this episode, which we're both extremely excited for, we're going to start off with our new player leaderboard segment for the past 3 games.
Yep.
Then we're going to move into a full recap of those games and kind of the rest of the season so far by breaking down each player on the roster in their order based on the combined leaderboard so far that the listeners have so kindly voted on and that you, David, have so kindly put together.
It's been a lot more work than we initially planned, but everyone has been playing along and DMing the pod account directly, which I should just take the opportunity now to thank them for doing that. And if anyone else wants to jump on board, that's how we're taking submissions from now, just so they're all at least in one place for me, Max.
Make it easy for David. He works hard. Have you seen his 7 plays or less segments? This guy works all the time. He's like on the team. All right, and then we'll get into the West playoff race, which, David, I'm hoping I'm not jinxing it, but may become a recurring segment on this podcast?
Yeah, we always get afraid of doing these things and then falling away from them because the Suns screw us up. But at least for now, and at least the next little while while we're ahead of 500, I should say, Max, I think it's going to be in the episodes.
Yep, and as we'll get into, I have a strong feeling, I'm starting to get confident we're going to stick in it, at least somewhat close. But before we get into all that stuff, David, how about a recap?
Yeah, so the Suns, as we said, are 7-4, Max, after 11 games. So a quick recap on the week that we missed, which was essentially week 3. There was a 114-105 win over Memphis, a 114 again to 109 win over Philadelphia, might be the best game of the season so far, and a 108-124 loss to Miami that we missed in week 3 there. But this week, being week 4, was a 138-112 win over Brooklyn, where Booker had 27-9, Rubio had 22-12, and Oubre had 18. Then we had the 115-123 loss to the Lakers, Max. Booker had 21-9 again, Rubio had 21-10, Baynes had 20-6. And then the last game that will come up a lot, I'm sure, in this 128-112 win over Atlanta. Oubre bounced back with 30, Booker had 27, and my guy Dario Saric had 23, Max. And that leaves us 2nd in our division, 5th in the conference, and 10th in the entire NBA. But Max, as you said, we've got some leaderboard votes to kind of go through here. So should we go to that straight away?
It's just amazing to listen to you rattle off those positions in our division conference in the league as compared to last year, where it was always the most depressing part of the whole podcast.
Speaking of things that we started doing and wanted to get away from, that was pretty depressing last year, where it's you can hear the fun in my voice as I read those ones out, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, let's go ahead and get to the leaderboard for this week. We'll do it pretty quickly since we're going to spend a lot of time on all the players for the rest of the podcast. I don't know about you, David, but I thought this was the easiest one for the 5-star vote, but the hardest one for basically the rest of it.
Yep.
I have Devin Booker as 5 stars this week.
I do too. He shot 56% from the field and 50% from 3 in the 3 games against Brooklyn, LA, and Atlanta this week. And he has my 5 stars too. I don't think we need to fight too much on that one, Max.
Nope, not really. Just the only thing I'll say for the rest of it is that he was really the only player who was consistently really, really good throughout. The rest of the players had blemishes, and so we'll get into where we have them ranked. I'll start at 4 stars, David. This is really hard. I had Ricky Rubio just because of how damn good he was against Brooklyn. He looked like Steve Nash.
Yep, and I do not disagree. 16.3 points, 10 assists for the week, shot 47% from the field and 40% from 3, which went a long way to those Nash comparisons, because it certainly helps when he's making his 3 shots, even though it definitely doesn't look anywhere near as pretty as Steve Nash did from out there. But no disagreement with you so far here, Max.
3 stars for me. This is a tough one because I think the next guy had more outstanding moments, but Aron Baynes was fairly consistent. The game against Atlanta, he was a little off on offense, but he still contributed, so I have him as the 3-star player.
I'm not going to give anything away just yet, Max, but I agree that it was very hard this week. I went 3 votes, Dario Saric, 17.7 points for the week, 5.7 rebounds, 2 assists. He shot 61% from the floor and 56% from 3 this week, Max, and that is enough for me to give him 3 votes.
He's my 2-star player. I thought he was very, very, very good. A couple, he has his moments, and I think Suns fans have started to jump on him, as we'll get to when we talk about him later, but I mean, this is definitely his best week of the season. I think he deserves it.
Yep. 2 votes for me, Frank Kaminsky. I thought he was sneakily good this week. Speaking of bouncing back on percentages, he shot 42% from 3 this week. And those 2 guys together, which I'm sure some people listening have seen, I highlighted them from the Atlanta game. I just thought they were the story of the week, that when the team really needed them, both Saric and Frank stepped up and hit shots. So I'm giving him the 2 votes this week, Max.
Yeah, that's part of why this week was so hard, because Frank's an honorable mention for me, but I really wanted to have him with a star. It's just, he was pretty bad in the Nets game. Really bad, actually, which is kind of why I sunk him a little bit, but he definitely stepped up over the last 2 games, and as I tweeted, I think, it makes us feel a little better about how he maybe weather the 8 in the stretch. But I'll get to my next one. It's Oubre. He had a disaster game against LA, obviously, but just the way he bounced back, incredible. He was just so good against the Hawks last night, so I stuck him in there.
Yep, I've got him for 1 as well. My note here is 1 bad game, 1 good game, and 1 okay game. And for me, that is enough for the 1 vote this week, which, as I alluded to before, means that it's a very tough week, and I couldn't squeeze in Aron Baynes or Cam Johnson, who I would consider both to be very unlucky, because if it was any other week, probably week 3, for instance, where 1 star was quite hard to find, those guys definitely would have found votes for the week. But going 2 and 1, suppose it was hard to squeeze everyone in, Max.
I just hope I have a podcast co-host next week and the Australian government is arrested for treason. That's all I'm worried about right now. Cam Johnson has an honorable mention as well. Cam was awesome. If this is sort of him trending towards like what he's going to be for the season, that's extremely exciting. Not only can the dude shoot, David, as you pointed out on this podcast and on Twitter, he can do other things too. He is kind of a rookie unlike we've had recently, because he's actually competent, David. Yep,
we're seeing the fruits of the way that James Jones thinks about these guys. He wanted guys that could contribute right away, had an NBA-ready skill, and that don't hurt you trying to do other things on the court. And that's the biggest compliment that I can give Cam right now, is his NBA-ready skill, even though there was a worrying game here or there early on, has basically translated straight away, which I'm sure we'll get to in a bit. But he doesn't hurt you. He kind of moves the ball, plays that 0.5 offense, doesn't make mistakes, and hasn't looked like a liability, at least so far, on defense either. But again, more on that, I'm sure, a little bit later, Max. I'll give you the full rundown of the leaderboard, which will give us structure to continue the episode, if you're ready for that now.
Let's do it.
All right, so just running over week 3 quickly. Booker, Baynes, Rubio, Tyler, and Oubre were both in our 5 votes. We just flipped Oubre and Tyler around, and that was pretty similar to everyone that submitted votes for that week as well. So before our week 4 votes go in and everyone starts sending us theirs as well, Max, we have Devin Booker atop at 322, Aron Baynes in second, a clear 80 votes behind that top guy. He's pretty clear, though, at the moment at least, of Kelly Oubre at 166 and Ricky Rubio at 160. Then we've got Jevon Carter, Frank Kaminsky, Tyler Johnson, Dario Saric, Mikal Bridges, and a couple of people actually gave Cam Johnson 1 vote last week, probably for showing some of these flashes that we're talking about. So that's all the guys with votes so far. Essentially makes up the rotation and the way that we'll go through in order from here, Max. But I have one question for you first, now that I've left Baynes out of my week 4 votes here. Fast forward to the end of the season, Booker's on top of the leaderboard. Who right now is going to finish second in your mind, Max?
It's a great question. I think the safe answer is probably Kelly Oubre. Or Rubio could too, though. They're, like you said, they're pretty close to the leaderboard right now, and he's been great. But I think when Ayton comes back, we'll get into this a little bit in the Baynes section. When Ayton comes back, he's going to just naturally take away some of what Baynes is doing production-wise, maybe not effectiveness-wise.
100%.
So I think it's probably Oubre is kind of the more consistent player than the other. What do you think?
I'm going to go Rubio.
Okay.
And we'll get into it very quickly. I think we're really seeing some encouraging things from him, and he's the engine that makes this team go. So that would be my guess, but I very much agree with your vote-stealing point in regards to Ayton and Baynes once he's back, Max.
Well, there's no doubt who's going to be number 1, and knock on every piece of wood, no injury. There's no doubt who's going to be number 1. That is Devin Booker. David, I want to start off with an awesome tweet with some stats for you, and then I'm going to ask you a question, okay?
Yep.
Cody James Hunt, at Cody Hunt, great follow on Twitter, follow him. He posted a tweet today, I don't know if you saw it, but he asked, he put the leader in 3 stats. So I hope you didn't see it because I'm going to ask you some questions about it.
Okay.
Who do you think the NBA leader in free throw percentage is for players with at least 50 free throw attempts?
I think you're leading me into this very nicely, like I don't do with you in Did You Know. I would say it's Devin Booker.
Devin Booker at 94.3%. David, who do you think the NBA leader in 3-point percentage is with at least 50 3-point attempts?
Devin Booker.
Devin Booker at 50%. Who do you think the NBA leader in true shooting percentage is for players with at least 150 field goal attempts?
Well, I had the free throw and the 3-point percentages down in front of me. I don't have true shooting. However, I'm going to go out on a limb and say Devin Booker.
It is 66.3% for
Wow.
Devin Booker, which is astronomical. And we're now at 11. We're at 11 games, so this is a real sample. So my question for you, David, I didn't mention field goal. It's at 53.7. Mm-hmm. Can Devin Booker join the 50-40-90 club this season?
It's looking pretty good. I specifically had the 94% down because that's really impressive. He's not getting to the line quite as much, but he is certainly converting there, which you just love to see. I think that will stay. He's definitely given himself a pretty good head start, even to dip a little bit and stay above 90%. 53 for field goal. He's going to have a slump at some point from 3, but again, he's given himself a really nice head start there. I'm going to go for it. I'm going to go Devin Booker 50, 40, 90, particularly because, one point that I wanted to make here is there's a far less burdensome load on him right now. It's probably only the Philly game is the one where he really put the team on his back or had to put the team on his back, Max. So, yeah, I'm going to go for it. I reckon it's possible just because there's a bunch of guys that are helping him out and then a big 7'1" guy from the Bahamas who is about to come back at some point too, Max.
Yeah, the concern, I guess, would be if guys start to go down with injury around him and he needs to start forcing it a little bit more.
Yeah.
Maybe,
yeah.
But I guess the 50% field goals is going to be the hardest part of it, particularly if he starts shooting more threes, which I think he probably should.
Yeah.
What do you think, David? This is something that I think it's something that Suns fans kind of argue over. Whether Booker should shoot more or whether they like him kind of being the distributor guy, because he's sort of varied back and forth this season. He's certainly been more of the get the team involved guy. In fact, I think you pointed out again last night against Atlanta when he passed out.
Oh man,
of that easy shot in the first quarter to get it out to I don't remember who it was, Baynes I think, but it was not good. He shouldn't be doing that. But sometimes you want to have guys early in the season especially overpass just to get the culture set. But anyway, so back to the question. What do you think? Where do you think Booker's headed this season? What should we expect to see him, in terms of his play style going forward?
I really like the 11 games we've seen so far. I'm happy. I think every game the chemistry between him and Ricky is looking better and better, even though I still think, splitting them up a little bit and leaning into the point book every now and then is still a great thing.
Yep.
Something that's going to come up a little bit later as well is, point book with some really fun, interesting wing and Ayton lineups as well, Max, which I definitely don't want to move entirely away from. But, I've got to give a shout out to Monty here now that you're giving me a chance to, before we get into some other stuff and I forget, because I think the combination right now is really, really good. I highlighted earlier this week, they're getting him a lot of cheap buckets underneath the rim, sealing his man off, and there's passes galore on this team now that can actually make an entry pass, Max, believe it or not. So I'm good with it because the balance is really good. His efficiency is off the charts right now, and you have to say that that's got something to do with the way that they're playing him, getting him some early looks, getting him some open threes, and I can't nitpick too much at the difference between how they're kind of doing things right now, Max. What about you? What do you think?
No, I'm with you, and I'm glad you mentioned the shots at the rim. He went from 27% at the rim last year frequency to 38% of his shots are at the rim. And it's just so beautiful the way he's cutting to the rim. He's really good at it, David. I think that's one thing that got kind of lost with his game because, obviously he had bad players around him who couldn't find him on cuts.
Yeah.
But the guy gets to the basket and cuts really, really well. It happens, 2 or 3 times a game, easy buckets. Part of the reason why his efficiency is so good, as you said, and why maybe he can actually reach that 50% field goal number throughout the entire season. But I think here's what I want to see more from Booker. It's not so much more, volume shooting. It's more getting to the line. He did it a lot in the Atlanta game towards the end of the second quarter when we really needed him to. When we, I think it was like tied with 2 minutes to go in the second quarter, and he got to the line twice just doing Devin Booker stuff.
Yeah.
Getting the calls again that the refs gave him. He was getting kind of superstar calls. They were, kind of going both ways kind of calls.
Yeah.
The call he didn't get at the end of the Lakers game, which may show you the difference in how you get calls against certain teams. But no, I'm with you. I think that I don't really understand the criticism of Devin Booker so far. Like, what do you want the guy to do? When he's shooting a lot, people get mad at him for that. When he's doing what he's doing now, people get mad at him for not shooting. I kind of just think he's playing well, David. And the stats kind of bear that out. I want to run down real quick something from Cleaning the Glass in terms of what Phoenix's offense looks like with him on and with him off. Phoenix offense, and this is points per 100 possessions, it's 20 points better with him on. That is 100th percentile in the league, David. He is the best.
Doesn't get any better than that.
It does not. The other starters are also good, but not nearly as good as that. And it's not like this is a mediocre offense that Booker's bringing up. This is the third best offense overall, according to Cleaning the Glass. And with Booker on, it's 100 percentile, 20 points better. So really, what Devin Booker's doing this season so far, it's still not a huge sample. It is certainly all-star worthy, David. Do you think it's all NBA worthy?
I had the exact same question for you. Before I run into that, I will just mention, I reckon a bit of a conversation maybe went on about drawing fouls and not putting himself in situations to get hurt maybe in the off-season. I think, we've talked long and hard about it on this podcast that he's prone to little ticky-tack injuries and our most important player that we can't afford to go down. And I just think we're seeing a lot less of that full steam ahead trying to draw fouls, on the break. And we're seeing a lot more of what I mentioned before, seals in the post, parts where, if you get fouled, it's unlikely going to hurt you because you're not going full steam ahead. And most of the time, as we're seeing, he's actually not drawing a lot of fouls on those post-up situations because it's not worth fouling him because he's already got you in jail. And you're just going to probably give up an and one. You want to talk about the difference between, Booker and Mitchell and how Rubio's played with them both. You mentioned it before. Booker's 6'6". Mitchell, I believe, in the official standings came out at 6'1" without shoes. Booker and Rubio have got a connection already getting Booker the ball in the post, which, as you said, he is very fucking good at, and they need to use that more and more. And I think it's good for his health, and I just wanted to make that point. They're getting him more cheap points, which is not only helping the efficiency, but I think it's helping his overall health as well. But to go back to the All-Star, we discussed it pre-season. We thought it was really opening up for him to be an All-Star. I think right now he's a lock. as far as all NBA goes, gets a little bit harder because of the restrictions around positions and talking about both sides. But, you got to say right now, and, we all know the people that vote on these love winning.
Yep.
So if the Suns have a similar record to what they do right now at the end of the year, he's going to be in the conversation. I don't know, because of the way they vote and who votes on this, whether he gets in. But starting with an all-star nod and putting him in that conversation, I think he's going to be up there if this trend continues, Max.
Agree. If the Suns make the playoffs, I think that he is going to be third-team All-NBA, which would just be awesome. Like, to have his first All-Star season also be an All-NBA season would just be great. It would be so validating for him. And that's really... And also, one last thing I want to touch on Booker, unless you got more on him. I love his attitude about all this so far, particularly when he's been asked about the MVP chance. Mm-hmm. He's basically just been saying, like, listen, I don't care about any of that. It's fun. Fans getting ahead of themselves. I'm just happy to finally be, bringing these people winning basketball for once and just not, like, gutter basketball.
Yep.
It's the perfect attitude. You can't be satisfied with where you're at. He clearly isn't. He's clearly, happy with where he's at. He's clearly happy to be playing winning basketball and having the fans cheer like that for him, but it's not the focus of his game. I think none of them feel like that is. I think they all have, and this is more of a Monty point maybe than a Booker point, but man, he has all these guys focused on the exact same goal, and it's really nice to see that, David, because we were seeing the exact opposite over the past couple of seasons.
Yeah, shout out to Monty again, and I agree. We saw that he hated losing in the really bad first seasons of Booker's career. Mm-hmm. And he said all the right things, to be honest, around that, that he just wanted to win, but no one really believed him because he was putting up, empty stats. And when you're losing, no one's really paying attention to the quotes or the things that you're saying in the media. All of a sudden, they're winning and he's saying the same, or ringing the same tune again, in terms of saying he doesn't really give a shit. He just cares that they're winning at the moment. And you got to believe that. Before we move on, I'd probably, if I'm going to nitpick, 4 turnovers a game, Max.
Yes.
And that's very much because he's had 1 of 7, a 6, and 2 5s. I think overall, it's not bad, but you throw in a couple of bad games, and that's, particularly on a small sample size, that's what throws it right up to 4 turnovers a game at the moment. Just something to watch.
Yeah, there were a few cheapies, especially last night, and they're having a few throughout the season. He's got to cut some of that out, especially since it's just so unnecessary with this team. Mm-hmm. But you know what? It's a small nitpick to make. I'm sure he'll improve it because he's improving everything else. We didn't even talk about the defense, David. We should probably just briefly mention that he's been way better on defense.
Yeah, I just like that he's fighting through. He's breaking up some actions, blowing some things up by fighting over screens, not getting cut backdoor as much. Maybe it helps that the Suns are cutting other teams backdoor much more, which kind of at least makes it appear to be a lot less than what it used to be. So yeah, that's to end on a positive. I think it's been overall good on that end for Devin Booker.
He's answered all the questions about whether or not he's like impossible to play in the playoffs. Like this guy can play in the playoffs for sure. There's no doubt.
Yeah, all the things that we kind of knew and spoke about on the podcast, but we're like, we just need to see it. They're all coming to fruition right now.
It's nice to see, isn't it?
Yep.
All right, Aron Baynes is next. He's been a revelation this season. David, the first thing I want to start with, maybe off the board a little bit, the shooting is for good reason getting a ton of play because it's been ridiculous, although he didn't shoot so well last night.
Yeah.
But the passing, David, I'm so interested in the passing. He's really high, like top 80 percentiles among bigs in the assists right now. And it's kind of, I didn't know he could pass like this, David. Is this something that he has shown in international ball, or is it just kind of a revelation this season?
Yeah, I got to shout out my national team here. I think he's got 2.9 assists per game at the moment, as you said. This is kind of the way that the Boomers play, Max. If you think about Australian teams, if anyone watched the World Cup, or it's pretty much been the same team for the last 10 years. So if you've caught them at any point at Olympics or major tournament recently, Patty Mills is one of our point guards. Matthew Dellavedova is the other. Patty Mills is essentially a shooting guard. He's not a point guard. Mm-hmm. Matthew Dellavedova is a defense first, not a great facilitator. So the way that they counter that is that they play ball very similar to what the Suns are playing right now. They move the ball, everyone can pass, everyone can move, they go off cuts, they run action for Patty Mills as more of a play finisher than a play setter-upperer. And that's what we see from our bigs. Andrew Bogut was one of them. Aron Baynes is certainly able to do it as well. And it's been really nice for that to flash for him. And I'm glad that you brought it up in conjunction with the shooting being outrageous, because I think we saw in the Atlanta game teams are going to start adjusting. They're playing right up on him on the three-point line, and that's going to open up the lanes. He's a great screener, can roll to the basket, doesn't have the best hands in the world, as we've mentioned before, but the passing game will open up as well if they play right up on him. There's a beautiful one to Dario against Atlanta from Baynes, coming off around a Booker screen, actually, down on the post, which is a nice little wrinkle on what we were talking about before with what they're doing with Booker in the post. So, yeah, great point by you. Great observation, because I think we're going to see that a little bit more as teams start to play up on him on the three-point line.
I want to get into the defense a little bit here, because I think the defensive stuff from Baynes he's been really good, like for Aron Baynes and for compared to the rest of our team.
Yep. Interestingly,
the kind of the advanced stats and the on-off stuff's not very good with him. I think it's probably with who he's playing with, but also because he's fouling a ton. I think he's always going to foul a ton because of who he is.
Agreed.
Our offensive rebounding is also very bad. I don't know if that's because of him, but overall, I think that's just kind of the case. Right now, we're the 9th ranked defense. I don't think that's probably where we are. David, I want to ask you, where do you think we are defensively, especially after, and focused on Baynes, especially after the last 2 games where we kind of got exposed a bit on the interior, at least in my opinion?
Yeah, I think the scouting report on all sides of the ball is going to come up more, and teams are going to start attacking what it was essentially an oversimplification of the defense, particularly with Ayton going out on the fly and having to adjust. You're right, Baynes isn't the greatest defender. He's a pretty good team defender, as is Dario, and those two as your kind of big men is working somewhat. Only 0.8 blocks a game, so he's not a great rim protector. Copping a lot of heat at the moment for his charges drawn, which he's probably averaging more of those than he is blocks per game.
Yeah.
But, I kind of look at that. I'm not going to go on a diatribe about that too much, but if teams and general NBA fans are complaining about that kind of stuff, you're kind of at least letting the world know that you're going to play defense. And if you're frustrating a few people along the way, then so be it. But yeah, a ton of fouls. There was one against Alex Len last night where he's essentially on the ground and just, dived off the floor to foul him. He knew it was going to be a foul. Like, that's why, he gets 4, 5, sometimes 6 fouls a game, because he's just happy to take those. But I think overall, I think I said it on the first episode, only a few games into the season, I think we'll slowly keep creeping down, but I wouldn't be surprised if we're still, league average or just above, halfway through the season, Max.
Yeah, I agree with you, and largely because they just give a shit, which is really important on defense. They're all in the right spots. They're all trying really hard, and that's enough to kind of get you in the middle of the pack, unless you just have no confidence whatsoever, which the Suns kind of do because they have, the whole Mikal, Oubre, long wing thing. They're not terrible, and Rubio's decent. They're not the worst defensive team in the world. They're not just a naturally good one.
Yeah.
But one thing I want to ask you about, and I alluded to it a little bit the past 2 games, over the Suns getting exposed on the interior a little bit by the Lakers, and then more concerningly, in my opinion, by the Hawks. So Ayton's gonna come back eventually, David. I don't know if you forgot.
Sometimes I do. Not gonna lie.
And Ayton's not necessarily known for his defense, but I kind of feel like he would be really useful in those situations, just to be, a 7-foot tall guy with a 7'5" wingspan standing there. There's a certain amount of athleticism among certain bigs that just, Kaminsky and Baynes just can't really stay with, and obviously Dario as well. That, even though Ayton's recognition can be bad at times, at least he can kind of be there. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think, credit to Trey for what he did last night, because he's just a brilliant point guard, and that's going to happen to even good defenses sometimes. But, yeah, I think Ayton, much better leaper than Baynes, a lot longer than Baynes, so there definitely would have been a couple of those plays where Ayton can go into drop coverage, but still be fast twitchy enough to react and either deflect the alley-oop or get enough in front of Trey that he just doesn't even bother to throw it. I think they really picked on Baynes. I've said it a couple of times, he can't jump. So if you get him on his back heels and he's retreating, then you've kind of got him cold, and that's kind of what they picked on a little bit there. So yeah, I think from that perspective, Ayton in those situations is going to be huge. What the Lakers did to us just in terms of having another low post presence, I think Ayton's going to be huge. And I don't know, it's probably another good segue here, Max. Do we dare talk about, I guess, what happens to the rotation when Ayton comes back, which can be a touchy subject. that both of us get criticised for us a little bit. But I've got a feeling, particularly with the last couple of games, we're probably going to be pretty positive on this question.
Yeah, I'm getting more and more confident about this just because I'm getting more and more confident in Monty Williams. Mm-hmm. I think that the dude is really finding ways for everybody on the team to contribute in certain roles. And I think that, the Sacramento game, obviously, Ayton was extremely good in. So if he plays like that, it won't be very hard. But assuming that Ayton isn't quite that level of a player when he comes back, which I think is probably a fair assumption because if he is, that'd be insane.
Yeah.
I think Monty's going to find a role for him. I think he's at least going to be able to, emphasize the things that Ayton does well while sort of hiding things he doesn't go as well. As far as where he's going to be in the rotation, I think it's going to be interesting. If Baynes is still shooting high 40s from three and playing quite as well as he is now, I think it's hard to start Ayton immediately. I think it's clear that Ayton's going to be a starter, and I think that the way they sell it is we're just to integrate him back in, we're bringing him off the bench, but he's gonna be the starter. Yeah, that's clear. I think that's maybe the way they do it because it's gonna be a bit of a shell shock when Ayton gets brought back, just because he's such a different player than Aron Baynes right now. Although, David, I would say this would be a good time for Ayton's maybe being able to shoot three-pointers to show itself a little bit.
Yeah, I certainly hope that he's been practicing those so he can at least let it fly if he's wide open. But, we said after one game they had to completely change, and that must have been a huge shock to everything that they'd planned in training camp. And then think about that from what you're saying now. 25 games of really solid basketball and the guys all being used to playing one way. All of a sudden you're going to flick the switch and go back the other way. And I just think that's why all fans, Ayton fans, people that aren't fans of Ayton, I just think what you said makes a lot of sense. Bringing him back in slowly, I think they've done a really good job. They know how to deal with people in locker rooms. We've already seen that with the Jevon Carter situation, which we might get to a bit later. Mm-hmm. They'll do it the right way. They'll put the PR out that, of course, he's going to start longer term, but they've just decided for all things, his fitness, the team, everything, chemistry right now, this is the way that they're going to do it. I wouldn't be surprised if that's what happens, and then we eventually see it the other way. But also got reminded during the week, can't remember by who, I wish I could give him a shout out, but Jones's comments at Summer League around having guys to put pressure on Deandre Ayton if he's not playing well, and maybe he'll sit some nights out. And even if he does start, that's what's going to happen, particularly this season, because we know that there's a guy there that can come straight in and play 20-25 minutes, and that's going to be a huge light under Ayton's ass, so to speak, in terms of playing hard every single minute, or else he won't get the minutes.
Yeah, no doubt. I actually think, and I've been brewing this take in my head, I haven't said it yet, I think there's a chance that this 25-game suspension is one of the best things that could have possibly happened to Ayton, because he saw what this team is without him.
Yep.
And if he comes back and he's the reason why it's not doing what it's still doing right now, you got to look in the mirror a little bit, right?
Yep.
There's no way you can't. So I think it's just going to be, and hopefully he just comes back and it's seamless. He comes right in. They're awesome. It's fine. But I think that this is nice. It's going to be something they can point to for him as, with like most 20-year-old men, they need kind of demonstration sometimes because everyone thinks they're invincible and awesome when they're 20.
Yeah.
That maybe you're not as invincible as awesome as you think you are, and here's some demonstration of how good it can be on this team. So, fit into this. You can make this that much better. You're the key to making this team not just a borderline playoff team, but like a solid playoff team, or even in a couple of years a contender. Yeah. So sink all that in. Maybe this could be the best that could possibly happen to him.
Yeah, I agree. I haven't wanted to emphasize it too much, but make too much of a big deal of it. But I do believe it's somewhat career defining, purely on the takes and decisions that have already been made by both sides on Deandre Ayton. I think we'll see very clearly which direction it's going to go from him after this little break. Before we move on to Ricky Rubio, it's a shame Baynes is shooting 72% from the free throw line, or else we might be having the same 50, 40, 90 discussion about him, Max. But speaking of somewhat surprising percentages, maybe we should talk about Ricky Rubio next.
I think we're a little out of order, which is fine. Doesn't Oubre have more votes, or am I wrong?
Oh, you are totally right. Let's go with Kelly Oubre, who's currently 6 votes ahead of Ricky Rubio in 3rd place on our leaderboard, Max.
This is the first time a Suns fan has ever ignored Kelly Oubre. So I want to start on Oubre, just kind of how important he's been to the team overall. He is actually leading the team on cleaning the glass in terms of overall differential on-off.
Wow.
You combine offense and defense. He's 92nd percentile in the league right now in that, which I think says a lot about just kind of what he's bringing to the floor, both in bench units and to the starting unit, because obviously the starting unit's going to be inflated by all of them being good.
Yeah.
I think the bench unit's bad without him, I guess is what I'm trying to say, because it's just they don't have an engine, and I think that, you and I have made that point multiple times. They need that engine from him, and David, he absolutely is living up to that description.
100%. I think, I had the question here. We don't necessarily need to go as a question because you've already alluded to it. There's still, right now, I'll put it this way. They need him in the starting lineup because I think of what he brings and what weapons or lack of weapons they have in the starting lineup.
Yep.
But we're seeing more and more evidence of the thing that we always used to say about TJ Warren, and that's that he's probably eventually going to be much better as a sixth man that can run everything through him. I'm loving the shot chart at the moment. If you go and look at it, there's only 4 shots taken outside the paint and not behind the 3-point line. So for all the dud games that he's had, specifically the Lakers one and probably the Utah one, which were both losses, he's playing exactly how we want him to. 1.6 assists to 1.6 turnovers, so evens out. Don't love that, but as long as they're both low, it's kind of okay, Max, because he's not hurting you. And he's the heart and soul of the team. We're seeing it every night. Mm-hmm. The way he bounced back from LA to the last game against Atlanta is just the biggest sign that he is all heart and someone that you can really count on, other than he's going to have a dud game every now and then, but who doesn't in the NBA? And the fact that he came back, and also, again, another shout out to Monty, the fact that he kind of recognized that dud game and only played him 19 minutes and didn't finish with him in that one. Another massive tick for Monty, just moving on the fly, Max.
Yeah, Monty's very good. But I do want to just emphasize what you said, because I think it was probably my second favorite game by anybody this season behind Booker and Philly, or playing Philly. Mm-hmm. The way he bounced back from that LA game was it was terrible, Dave. Like, not only was he missing shots, like, I didn't watch it live. I actually just saw the box score. I was like, ooh, Oubre was bad. Then I watched it the next day, and I was like, oh my God, Oubre was bad. Like, he was, the 3-point shots he was missing were like, they were not close.
Yeah.
It was like it was a nightmare game. And the fact that he came back and played that way, just the game after, it just shows you who he is and how, and I said this, I think, on Twitter or something, but he's going to have bad games sometimes, like you said, most players do, but he's never going to have a game where he doesn't bring his energy to the game, ever. It's never going to happen. And a guy like that across an 82-game season is just so valuable. He's more valuable than any of his stats are. He's more valuable than any of his individual games are, because it inspires the rest of the team. It makes everybody else bring their energy around him. You can hear his teammates talk about him. They all freaking love him. He's the guy who stamped on the Valley Boys. He's all that stuff. He's everything, David. I could not be happier with Kelly Oubre right now.
Yep, and if he keeps playing the way that he is, as you said, and that shot chart keeps looking that way, even with some slumps, the fact that he's taking it to the hole, I think he's our most confident player at the moment at going through those creases in the defense and attacking. Has some really sneaky, sneak up on you type dunk sometimes. And the right hand that he's added in the offseason has really helped him with finishing around the rim and finishing off some of his good work. So, yeah, I think all credit to him. He's 16.9 points per game at the moment, a massive reason why this team is sitting where they currently are, and even sits in a lot of those advanced stats groups, as you mentioned before. So if you bring the heart, plus he's also ticking the box of nerd Twitter in terms of what he's bringing to the team, it's pretty hard to hate on Kelly right now.
I will say I'm going to do the only possible hate on Kelly I can do right now, because I'm with you. I'm over the moon with Kelly right now. I think there's maybe a reason why he was so bad against the Lakers and so good against Atlanta. I think it's going to be harder for him to do what he does against good defenses, because a lot of what he relies on is kind of getting to the rim in that way, and a lot of the good teams will close them off on that kind of stuff and force them into worse shots. And his decision-making, Cole Zwicker's pointed this out on our podcast quite a few times. It's not great. It could use a lot of work, honestly. I think there was one shot even last night in his great game where he passed up a pretty nice set shot 3 for a step back 3, like immediately after.
Yep.
He does stuff like that sometimes, and you take it because the energy stuff's worth it. Everything else is worth it, but it's something to monitor. I would like to see him really dominate a good defense. That's the kind of thing I want to see from him going forward. But if he doesn't, it's fine. Again, his energy across 82 games is worth it. Could not be happier with Kelly Oubre.
Yep, it should be no surprise that he seems to, anecdotally, and I think if you look at the numbers, be playing much better when he shares the floor with Ricky Rubio. And how about that for an assist segue going to our next guy, Max?
I loved it, David. Ricky Rubio. I want to, because I just spoke, and also because I want you to lead with Ricky Rubio, because I know how much you love him right now.
I just love pure point guards, and watching Ricky night in, night out, re-watching the games, it's just making me fall in love and remember all those things that I, really didn't love since, I guess, Steve Nash was on this team, Max. And he's not Steve Nash by any sense. We're going to see a little, probably, bit of regression, or, he's streaky. He has these moments where he's hitting all of his shots, and then probably will have a week where he's just hitting absolutely nothing, and that's why his career percentages are the way that they are. But he's a career high 37.5% from three right now. It helps with the pairing stuff with Devin Booker when he's hitting those shots. It's a small sample, but you add it to the World Cup run and you kind of wonder whether maybe it's getting a little bit better. And I've noted a couple of times he's hitting the right one, Max, really key moments of games where the defense decides to leave him open, which is the right move. That's the scouting report, but he's hitting those ones, and that they're the ones that can become really grating when you're looking back at a loss or something of like a missed shot like that, and we're not getting that at the moment. And 8.7 assists, which is the most since his last year in Minnesota, and I think it's very clear that he's being used by the Phoenix Suns a lot more the way that he was used there with the Wolves than against Utah, Max. And I just love the intangibles as well. The pesky D, the help defense, deflections, the leadership, and he just has moments. There's moments when a game ends where you remember Ricky Rubio when he's played well, and that's what I love about it. And I laughed at the comment at the time, Max, but James Jones's prime comment about Ricky Rubio justifying the signing. I know it's only 11 games. I know he's got a history of having niggles and things like that, but he might have been on the money with that one, Max.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And by the way, I don't know what that word you just said was. I assume that's Australian slang.
Which one? I totally missed it.
About his little minor injuries?
Niggles?
Yeah, I haven't heard that one before. I just want to clarify what you're saying here.
We used to have those all the time, remember? That speaking of regular things on the podcast, me bringing up Australian terms and you questioning me on them. Yeah, niggles. It's like, little injuries for any of our US listeners like Max, who had absolutely no idea what I just said.
Just a clarification. All right, back to Ricky Rubio. I mean, listen, he's been probably the single biggest change on the team from last year, just having somebody on the floor for 30-plus minutes a game who knows what the hell is going on at all times.
Yep.
A floor general is sort of a cliche at this point, but he's kind of the embodiment of what that means. You're seeing a lot of guys in the national media now sort of doing mea culpas on the Ricky Rubio signing.
Yes.
Dunk John's done that. The Ringer guys have done that. A bunch of guys have done that. And they say the same thing that we were saying over the summer, which is, you can't really shoot, so for that reason, he's not a good fit with Booker. But, also he's good at basketball as a point guard, so maybe that helps. It's like, oh my God, it's not really that hard, but anyway.
Hey, if people are admitting that they're wrong, I'll take it, even though we tried to warn them.
I totally agree with that. Ricky Rubio, I think that the shooting is probably not as good as it is now, but I think there are some reasons to feel good about it, at least being better than it has been in the past. And I think you mentioned it with the Minnesota thing. It's just nice to have a team that has 100% confidence and faith in you and views you as one of its best players. Basketball is a lot about confidence. You and I are not professional basketball players. I think most of our listeners probably aren't professional basketball players.
Yep.
But having confidence is a really important thing in many walks of life, but especially playing sports. And I think when, that's kind of how you're feeling about yourself, it's easier to make shots. I think it probably contributes a lot to Baynes being better. It contributes to Frank being better. Contributes to everybody being better. And so I expect to see Rubio better on offense as things keep going. But, as you alluded to also, we're going to have both worlds. We're going to have the streaky Rubio, and last night was an example of that. He was so good as his floor general assist self. He was not good as a shooter, David.
Yep. And I think I said it last episode, confidence is a hell of a drug. And again, shout out to Jones and Monty. This is what they're doing.
Yep.
They're instilling confidence with their guys, and it should be no surprise that that's why some of them, at least for right now, are doing career high things, whether it's Aron Baynes, Ricky Rubio, or even Kelly Oubre there, Max. But maybe we'll move on. What do you think?
Yeah, let's do it. To somebody else who maybe had some confidence early in the season, was his confidence saved by Monty Williams? I don't know. It's Jevon Carter, David. This is an interesting one because he's 5th on this list, but he's no longer really playing. He played a little bit in garbage time last night. I think Monty just saw that, the offense wasn't really working with him, despite the fact that he was, providing the defensive spark plug. I don't know, David. What do you think? I actually thought that maybe there was a chance he gets in last night against Trey. The size kind of works, the peskiness kind of works, but didn't happen. How are you feeling about Jevon Carter right now?
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought as well. I've said it. Him as a luxury rather than a backup point guard is the perfect role for him, and maybe that was the game where they could have thrown him in as a luxury because they needed exactly what he brings to the NBA floor. But surprising that they didn't, but still a huge tick for Monty to essentially cut down his rotation from 10 to 9. He said 10 at the start of the season, so again, it's him being flexible and not holding himself to silly rules and just realizing what the best move to make is. Carter was 1.9 assists to 1.3 turnovers, which isn't great. The shooting was what was keeping him on the floor, and then kind of as soon as that dropped off, the lack of playmaking was really highlighted. So I can't say, again, enough about Monty making that decision. And probably while I've got the chance with Monty, we're also 8th in pace and 9th in 3-point attempts. Two things that people were worried about, probably silly looking back at his New Orleans coaching record and things that he did with them, which was just too far long ago. And we even noted on the pod that he'd been to some much more modern teams and franchises since then. And again, he's proving us all wrong. But on Jevon Carter, probably the only thing I can really think of right now, and I don't want to do too much of a disservice to him, but does this mean that Ty Jerome's going to have to really fight, or that there's an open roster spot? Because when Ayton's back, that goes back to that 10-man rotation again, and minutes are going to be pretty hard to find if they're going to put Tyler Johnson in as the backup point guard, Max.
I want to start real quick with the Monty thing because you brought him up. Then I'm going to go on to the Jevon Carter thing. I think it kind of feels like Monty Williams is totally let all of the stubbornness that coaches typically have go and just said, I'm going to listen to, the modern stuff. I'm going to listen to all that crap and just play basketball that way and just do what I'm amazing at, which is being an amazing human and leader and just doing all that stuff. And it really just feels like he is so adaptable. There's no stubbornness to him at all. He changes on the dime in all the right ways. I agree with you, David. There's really not a bad thing you can say about Monty Williams right now. He's been 10 out of 10 as a coach.
I love that observation, purely because, I probably had a dig at him preseason about, talking up his leadership, but, being worried about what he might be as an on-court and tactical guy. And you're right, he's turned the leadership stuff right up to 11 on the volume dial, and he's just gone with the really sensible stuff on the court. And again, can't say enough about the guy. So give us your Carter point.
So Jevon Carter, I think that we had talked about this a little bit in the offseason. The Suns needed another guard, we thought, on the roster. They didn't really have another depth guard in case of an injury because things have been great so far. But guys, it's very likely that Tyler or Rubio or Booker is going to go down with an injury at some point this season.
Yeah.
Just is.
Yeah.
And at that point, he's going to be important because the fact that he can actually, reasonably play basketball on an NBA team is something that's nice to have around. It's better than signing a guy from the G League or signing an undrafted free agent, Portland, not undrafted, but unsigned free agent. It's better than doing that. It's better to have a guy who's already in your system, already in your locker room and stuff. So the fact that they've developed that very early on could pay dividends later. I do think Ty Jerome is going to get a chance right away just because Ty Jerome is a little more kind of what this team is, the pass and move and shoot thing.
Yeah.
Also has some size to be a little bit versatile and the defense thing. So I do think Ty Jerome at least gets a chance at first. We'll see how he plays. I think it'll be good because I'm a homer, but we'll see. But I think Jevon Carter has been developed for maybe a future role in case of injury. Anything else on Jevon Carter? Or do you want to move on to Frank Kaminsky?
Let's move on to Frank the Tank.
Frank the Tank. So this would have been a very different conversation, David, had we had this podcast last week. My apologies, we couldn't.
Very true.
He, in the last 2 games, has really gotten his confidence back. It looked like for a while there he was all in his own head. He actually was playing pretty good defense the whole time. He's actually one of the leaders on the team in like defensive on-off stuff, which is interesting.
Yep.
But his offense had totally gone off the rails. He was missing free throws like badly. That's how you know somebody's in his own head. But it seems like he's gotten back into it now. The past 2 games have been very good offensively, including against the Lakers. So I don't know. Where are you feeling on Frank right now, David? Do you think that more of what we've seen lately in the beginning of the season is Frank, or is it more what we saw during that bad stretch?
Yeah, great point by you on the podcasting week to week and how much can change. I think we really saw that with what we planned to do last week and couldn't quite do one, and then out the way we feel this week. It's such a window into how things can change very quickly and not to be too tied down in our thoughts. But good to see him bounce back. The 2.4 assists is the good stat for me. He had that big game in the preseason, but he also had one in the regular season, 6 assists. He's got 2 games with 3 assists. He's just a classic Jones player. And I think that it's probably more what we saw in the Atlanta game. Again, confidence, hell of a drug. Mm-hmm. We're going to see good and bad from Frank. Hopefully more good than bad. But with Ayton coming back, I thought about this. It's like, what happens to Frank? I've said for a long time, I think he's more of a 5. It's great when the 3-point shot's not hitting because he does have moves down on the block and you can kind of run something for him to maybe get fouled and go to the line or get an easy bucket. I still think that's his position. And probably the positive angle to take on that is, if they can use the wings more when Ayton's back, he's only going to play kind of like the Carter situation. He may only play when he's hot and when he's hitting shots, and they may not be as reliant on him when Deandre Ayton comes back, which was probably the plan all along, and he's had to play a hell of a lot more, and therefore we're kind of seeing the good and the bad. But a test quiz for you here, Max, something that I found going through.
Sure.
Thinking about how bad he has shot the ball, and then, Saric being pretty streaky and Baynes obviously being outstanding. Frank, Saric, and Baynes together straight on from 3. If I said that they've shot 54 as a combo, how many would you say, or what percentage would you say that they're hitting from straight on from 3 at the moment? Okay,
so from straight on, you mean above the break, not corners?
And not on the wings, like literally like the 6...
Oh, literally straight on?
Literally straight on.
Okay. Wow. I would say they're shooting... they're shooting pretty damn well. I'd say they're shooting 40%.
Those 3 have hit 27 of 54, 50%.
Wow.
From straight on. And it's not all one either. Like, it's a pretty shared distribution between the 3 of them. I posted Saric and Frank's shot chart earlier on Twitter, which you probably missed. But they've both got some really bad spots on the floor that they're missing from at the moment. But all 3 of those guys, and particularly with the way that this offense is being run, it's been really, really nice that they're hitting their shots from up there.
Yeah, that's wild. I don't think it's going to continue at quite that clip, but it's going to continue to a certain clip. The guys can shoot.
Mm-hmm.
And I think to your point earlier about how do you get minute allocations here, Baynes is going to play no matter what. But I do think once Ayton comes back, it's going to be kind of like a hot hand between Frank, Dario, and maybe Cam Johnson.
100%.
Yeah, that's what it's going to be. And Dario will probably start, and then we'll just see where it goes from there. And, maybe eventually Frank starts or Cam starts. We'll see how it goes throughout the season. As we've said, Monty's not going to be shy to pull the trigger.
Yep.
But it'll be interesting to see how that unfolds. I'm happy with Frank right now. Overall, he's way exceeding our expectations from preseason, for sure.
Yep.
So, we'll see how it keeps going. Hope he keeps playing this way. It's encouraging. Should we move on to somebody whose play has maybe been a little bit less encouraging, David, Tyler Johnson?
Sure. Yeah, I'll start off as the chief of the Tyler Johnson hive.
Yes.
My excuse for him, I think he was getting into a bit of a groove as the shooting guard spark plug for this team, and then the rotation change, which we've mentioned already with Carter going out, and therefore he had to move more to an on-ball backup point guard type role, and I think he can do both pretty, steadily, but I think the backup shooting guard role is probably better for him. I don't think you would disagree with that. And just the change has kind of thrown him off what was appeared to be an early groove. And, you mentioned it before, they're thin at guard, particularly if someone goes down. So we kind of need him playing well. He's only playing 18.8 minutes at the moment. And, he's kind of super important, at least the way that the roster currently looks. So I think he should play more. Again, confidence, get him a little bit more, get him the ball in the situations that we were seeing him early on in the season. Even if he is playing that pseudo backup point guard role, like try and get him a couple of early looks. He was coming off curls and hitting elbow jumpers really well early in the season. Just kind of get him that groove, because I think we've been a little bit unfair on him in the rotation so far, Max.
No, yeah, I'm with you. And listen, he hasn't been terrible, especially not on the season. The past couple of games he's been pretty damn bad. Yep. But he's had some moments. He really came in and hit some big shots. I think the Philly game was one. He hit some big shots in Sacramento. He was part of the reason why they went on a run, I remember. So he has definitely had his moments. He has not been a really bad player, and I agree with you. He was definitely feeling himself more as the backup shooting guard than the backup point guard.
Yeah,
that's not been good for him lately. And I think the worst lineups the Suns have had over the past few games have been the lineups with Tyler out there without Booker or Rubio. Those lineups have been tough.
Agreed.
So I think it's going to really help when Monty gets a guy like Ty Jerome back in. Hopefully he's good as a rookie. To just be more of a natural point guard and maybe have those two play together a little bit. We'll see how it goes. Maybe that won't work, but I still think Tyler is incredibly important to the team, as you said, as if nothing else, as like a depth guard piece, because they don't have a lot of those. Mm-hmm. And I expect him to come in. Here's the thing about Tyler Johnson. I would just like Monty Williams to have somebody to go to when Tyler's off, because it becomes pretty apparent pretty early when Tyler's not playing well. So it would be nice to have somebody that, it could be Ty Jerome or whoever else, where if Tyler's off on a night, you can play 5 minutes and that's it and you're fine. If Tyler comes in, makes his first shot, he's looking good, you have him out there a little bit longer. I'm totally with you. I mean, obviously he's overpaid in the 1 year, $18 million deal, but he is giving us way more than Ryan Anderson ever would have. And there's really no reason to be upset about the fact that Tyler Johnson's on the team.
Yep, played some great defense on Trey last night when they needed to really ramp things up, which is his big calling card. And yeah, I agree. I think when we looked at the depth chart at the start of the season, we just thought, a backup shooting guard, or a backup to the backup at shooting guard, just for those nights, as you said, where things aren't going too well. Maybe that's where Carter sees his minutes occasionally, and as you said, maybe that's where Ty Jerome sees some of his minutes, either with Tyler or without Tyler. But we can move on from Tyler Johnson, I think, now, Max.
Let's move on from Tyler Johnson. Dario Saric. He has been, as I mentioned earlier, kind of like a whipping boy for the Suns fans to a certain extent.
Yep.
I'm not sure why, maybe because he remembers them of Dragan Bender. That's what I think it probably is. They think he's Dragan Bender. Dario Saric is definitely a lot better than that. In the last few games, David, you had him ranked as your third star player, so why don't you talk about him?
Yeah, I just think he's been flying under the radar a little bit. He's getting better each game. A guy who doesn't have a lot run for him, so they're the guys that, it's going to take him a little bit of time to get acclimatized. I was talking to a Sixers fan on Twitter earlier today who, loved his time with Dario on the team. We were kind of just talking about how, confident Dario is probably one of my favorite players in the league, and non-confident Dario would be one of my least favorite players in the league. And that part of it is kind of similar to Dragan Bender in terms of like the things that I love watching in players. But as you said, he is a hell of a lot better than Bender. One thing, good defense, post defense, and his rotations, I think, have been unheralded. They're things that, the general fan base doesn't look out for a hell of a lot. And, similar stats to previous seasons, but he appears to be a lot happier. I caught a tweet, apparently he was on the radio after the Atlanta game, just talking, really, really highly of the Suns franchise and the front office. Obviously, he's in a contract year, so you're going to say those kind of things, but it just surprised me that his stats aren't all that different. We thought in the preseason, he was unhappy because he wasn't being used enough, and they're kind of using him just as much. But, he seems to be happier. Shooting 40% from three at the moment, which is really, really crucial to this team. Like Frank, he's got his spots. Like the right wing, he's 2 of 12. Left corner, he's 1 of 5. And then everywhere else, he's 17 of 33 for 51%. So, and I think when I looked at Frank, he was like 4 of 27 from the wings, but then really good from straight on, as we mentioned before. So, that's up to the team. Got to get them the looks in their spots, particularly if they don't like it in certain places. But, overall, his line's really solid. He's just that kind of starting power forward, as we mentioned, with the amount of talent on this team that just does all the little things and can be a little bit of a glue guy on this team, I think, Max.
Yeah, unheralded is a good way to put it. He's not getting a lot of credit even when he's good, but he's been, particularly in the last game, he was saving us for stretches. with some of his 3-point shooting. Like you said, 40% for him, and 3-point shooting on offense is going to be the key the whole way around.
Yeah.
Although he does have some ability to drive a little bit and score. Although it's one of those things. I think this is one of the reasons why people don't like him very much. It's because it's always ugly. So when he uglily drives and scores, it's like, oh, that was ugly. Oh, he scored okay, but it was ugly. And then when he ugly does it and then it gets blocked or it looks horrible, like it's like, oh, screw Dario. He doesn't get a whole lot of credit.
There was a perfect one of those last night where Aron Baynes sealed off his man and just created, it was like parting the Red Sea for Dario to drive. Mm-hmm. He made the bucket, and I saw a number of people on Twitter commenting, that he didn't dunk it. Like, can Dario even dunk the ball? Yeah. Why didn't he dunk it? Etc., etc. So, yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. There's always going to be a complaint whether he finishes or not, just because it never looks overly graceful.
I actually thought it was one of the more pretty ones. That was like the finger roll-ish kind of finish, right?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Because he's uglier than that sometimes. So, Dario's going to be a whipping boy all season, I think. But on this podcast, you're appreciated, Dario. We like you around here.
What do you pay him, Max? Throw Suns cap out. Throw the fact that everyone keeps saying that there's no good players in free agency and going to be all this money. Just from what we've seen of good Dario, what is that worth per year, do you think?
Oh, God. Here, you know what, David? I'm going to say, if we're going off right now what's going on, I don't think the Suns bring him back. And it's not totally because of him. It's largely because they're going to bring Frank back on that stupid it's $5 million. They're going to bring him back on that if he plays this well.
Yeah.
Aron Baynes, they're not going to let him go if he's playing this way the whole season. There's no chance. Mm-hmm. They're going to bring him back. So, at some point, it's like, all right, how many of these guys you're going to bring back? They're probably going to want to make some other move. I just don't think they do it. Because also on Dario, you're not going to be able to get him on a short-term deal. He's a young guy. If he's playing well, so I think they probably let him go. Also, Cam Johnson, presumably, would take over that role a little bit.
Yeah.
So, in a vacuum, I think he's probably worth, in that, 8 to 10 range, but I just don't think the Suns are the team to bring him back. Do you think that's right or no?
Yeah, I'd go a bit more. I'd maybe go 10 to 12
okay.
For really good Dario, maybe even up to 14 when you throw some of those other variables like the market and stuff in. And yeah, that's why I threw the question at you, because I think there's a ton of variables whether they really like him or not, that it probably just wouldn't be a smart investment going forward. But that is a discussion for a very much later podcast, Max.
Yep, to be fair, if you're shooting 40%, I probably should have focused on that. That would change things. All right, let's go on to Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson together. David, this is kind of an interesting one. I'll start with sort of the fact that both these guys have had really bad on-off numbers. Mm-hmm. I think largely because the units are playing in. I don't know if it's totally their fault.
Yeah.
Let's start with Mikal Bridges. You recently said that you would buy everybody's stock on Mikal Bridges. So listeners, if you're listening and have stock on Mikal Bridges you don't want, David will take it.
All of it.
Why don't you give us a little bit of a summary on what you think about Mikal Bridges' performance?
Yeah, I'm still riding it. I'm still predicting that he's going to come out. Even the three, I've said a few things, posted a few videos. I think he just needs to keep shooting it. He's got to make in every game where he shoots more than 1-3. So I just think it's a confidence thing. He's no Cam, who's currently shooting 41% as a rookie and just looks automatic, which is awesome. But I do think he's going to be better than the 23% that he's currently shooting right now. And I've noticed a couple of little tweaks to the shot that I'm kind of happy about. It looks a little less herky-jerky. But, the observation on him right now, we've seen it game to game. I think he's playing more when there's a wing or more dangerous wings on the opposition, and he's playing less when that's not the case. And, Cam's essentially taken his spot in the rotation. I think if you look at overall, Mikal's 19 minutes to Cam's 16 per game. Then you go last 5 and they even up. Mikal's about 20, Cam's about 19. You go last 3 games, Mikal's 18 and Cam Johnson is 22. So again, going off that Monty point of not being too rigid with his rotations, I think right now Cam Johnson's playing better. But I will say I like them together, and I even like them together with Kelly Oubre long-term as well, Max. So my point there, I think we get too bogged down in creating these competitions instead of looking at the possible strengths of all these guys being on the team together rather than one having to replace the other, Max.
Yeah, your idea on Twitter last night of a Booker Ayton lineup with those three wings, Mikal, Cam, and Oubre was enticing, David. I would like to see that happen. That would be really fun.
Particularly if they're all hitting, at least 32, 33% from three. I think Oubre's hovering around 33 at the moment. Hopefully Mikal can get up north of 30 and Cam's been awesome. So that lineup's just got everything. Like Booker's the star. You've got Ayton as the big guy. And as we've said with Ayton, pretty much since the Suns drafted him, like drafting him at number one should be because you can put him out there as the anchor to the defense with lots of smaller guys and not be too worried about, overall defense, rim protection, and even rebounding with playing three wings or even four wings if you count Devin Booker. So, yeah, I got to see that at some point. I think that's a fun lineup that we can look forward to in the future, Max.
You would need to see somebody like Mikal or even Ayton, maybe even Cam, improve the playmaking a little bit because that would be a lot on Booker in terms of running the offense. But, yeah, I think that, there are a lot of young players in that lineup. If a lot of them sort of improve as playmakers and ball movers, that lineup could be pretty nasty. But you focus on Mikal. I'll focus on Cam. Real quick, I'll just say I agree with you mostly on Mikal. I'm a little more nervous than you just because I hate when players are scared to shoot. And Mikal seems a little scared to shoot. I like seeing that shot go down against Atlanta in the first quarter last night. But, man, as we talked about on Twitter, his three-pointers attempts have gone down from last year, and that scares me a little bit. Cam, man, so... The thing about Cam Johnson, David, there are guys who can shoot. There are guys who learn how to shoot and become reasonable three-point shooters. And there are some guys who are just born able to shoot, and it's not a problem. Yeah. And they're just going to shoot. And Cam Johnson is definitely the latter of those two things. That guy is... every single shot he puts up is gorgeous looking, and he thinks it's going in, and I think it's going in, David. And that's a really important thing in a player. Like, you watch him shoot and you just know he's going to be a great shooter, David. There's just no doubt about it.
Beautiful misses, I like to say.
Yes.
He puts it up and you never think it's missing, and then even when it does, you're like, God, that was a beautiful shot. Like that's what it is with him, which, grouping these two guys together, Mikal has a lot of ugly misses right now. Has a lot of beautiful makes, like that one you mentioned against Atlanta. But yeah, that's the difference in their two strokes right now. And Cam is just going to be that guy, and it's going to be all about what he can add on top of that to justify taking him where they did. Although, if he's, 41% on 8.1 threes a game per 36 at the moment, that in itself might be valuable enough in this draft.
Yeah, as a 6'9" guy, right? Yeah.
Yeah, but I just wanted to touch, he does have a chance to add those little things, and he's not so far been too much of a liability on defense. They're going to pick on him a little bit more as he plays more, I'm sure, and it'll be good to see how he responds to that. But, I talked about this quite a lot in development podcasts that we have. Just having an NBA-ready skill that gets you on the floor, which then gives you the reps to improve other things, is just so crucial in this league as a young guy, Max.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I want to take a shot at all the value people out there on Cam Johnson. Listen, if you can get a guy who's a stretch big with Cam Johnson's apparent shooting prowess, like I'm assuming that's who he is kind of what we've seen in the last couple of games, which is sort of fair to assume considering, he's still a rookie. He could be a lot better than this even.
Yep.
Like, that's a good pick at the draft spot they got him at, number 11. And I think the whole value conversation is so stupid. Like, maybe the Suns were right that Cam Johnson would have got taken number 15. I hate it. I think it's dumb. I think we even said this at the time. Like, we didn't agree with necessarily who they picked. And by the way, Brandon Clark looks pretty good. I'm just going to say that. Cam Johnson was not a bad pick if he's what he is right now at all. Like, I think once you get past the top 7 or 8, it's kind of a crapshoot anyway. Take whoever the hell you want at that point because it's kind of how the NBA draft works. But David, are we ready to move on to Did You Know?
Let's do it, Max. After a pretty surprising 7-4 start for our beloved Suns, I had to look back through the archives for how it compares to recent Suns teams. So did you know it has been some time since the Phoenix Suns were 7-4 through 11 games? In fact, going to throw an impossible early test your way, Max. What season do you think the Suns last had the exact record of 7-4 at this point of the season?
God, that could not be a meaner question, David. They started kind of slow, but were pretty good in 2009-10, I'll say that.
Ooh, you're about a decade off. It was 99-2000 where the Suns opened up with an OT loss to Denver 102-107. Weirdly, they followed that up with a 4-game win streak, Philly, the Spurs, Chicago, and the New Jersey Nets. Then a 3-game losing streak, Milwaukee, Minnesota, and the Lakers. And then 3 more wins over Chicago, the Knicks, and Seattle to get to 7-4 at the 11-game mark. In fact, those 2 wins actually formed the start of a 7-game winning streak, ending with a double OT 128-122 win over the Houston Rockets, and therefore an 11-4 record before dropping their next game to the exact same team, the Houston Rockets. Max, fingers crossed the Suns can get to 11-4 before another loss. That would make our next podcast very fun, I'm sure. But it might be a good omen because this Suns team ended 53-29, making the playoffs and even winning a first-round playoff matchup over the Spurs. Max, next bunch of questions for you now, and then I promise I'll lay off you a little bit. Let's take a look at the 99-2000 Suns team. Question 1 for 10 points. If you can tell me who the lead assist guy was on that team with 10.1 per game.
Was Jason Kidd still around? He was, right?
10 points for you. Played 67 games that season and was the most assists on the team. For 100 points, question 2. If you can tell me who top scored for that team with 18.5 points per game.
McDice?
It was Cliff Robinson, who shot 46% from the 4 and 37% from 3 on 4.1 attempts, which I thought was quite surprising. Now, for 1,000 points, if you can tell me who the top rebounder on that squad was.
This is for 1,000 points, so it basically means there's no chance I get it. I don't know, David. Who was it?
It was Tom Gugliotta with 7.9 a game. And this one, for all redemption, question 4 is worth 1,000,000 points, Max. If you can tell me who started the most games for this team in 99 with 68 starts, and I'll give you a clue, it was at center.
Oh, God. I don't know, David. Who was it?
It was none other than Luke Longley, who averaged 6.3 points.
Your guy.
My guy, 4.5 boards, and shot a woeful 46% from the field that year. Funnily enough, Max, this team appeared to have an exorbitant amount of starters for the year. 14 players started at some point in the season, including Sean Marion, who was drafted that year, Oliver Miller, who was signed that year in free agency, and Anthony Hardaway, who was traded for that year. But Max, perhaps the biggest story from that season, and definitely more odd than the 14 players starting, was Danny Ainge quitting the head coach job just after their hot start and a record of 13-7. Ainge cited his family as the reason for the move, with a quote at the time saying, "Some of you may think I'm jumping ship. I don't believe I'm jumping ship. I'm diving overboard to save my family." Scott Skiles took over and went 40-22 himself to keep the season going in the right direction. But Max, I think we are hopefully safe from any similar move from Monty at this point in the season this time around. Now, as I said before, Phoenix made the second round of the playoffs after their 7-4 start. But Max, want to take a stab at how many times the Suns have gone better than 7-4 to start 11 games in the 20 seasons between that 99 season and where we are right now?
Oh, wow. Interesting. So, obviously, they did it quite a few times in the 2000 and then not as many times later. I'd say 8.
It was just 5.
Wow.
Believe it or not. Slow starts, maybe. Firstly, the following year, Phoenix started 8-3 under Skiles, won 51 games and lost in the first round. Fast forward to 04-05 and you get 9-2 under D'Antoni, 62 wins and a conference finals appearance. Then a 3-year streak from 07 to 2010 where the Suns went 9-2, 8-3 and 9-2 respectively on their way to 55, 46 and 54 wins. D'Antoni, Terry Porter, and Alvin Gentry were all coaches in that span, and the Suns missed the playoffs just on one occasion. So Max, with all that in mind, and to finish things off for Did You Know this week, and before we take a look at how the West is shaping up for the P word that I'm still struggling to say with the Suns, I've got one question for you and the listeners to ponder while they're listening along as well. I believe you predicted 35 wins before the season started. Do you want to change your mind on that prediction total yet?
I do. You want me to give a revised prediction on the spot?
I'm ready to change mine. I'm going to go 500. So what do you think?
Oh, man. Put me on the spot. I think they're going to be a little bit above it. I think they're going to win 43 games, David.
Ooh, all right. That's it for this week. So perfect timing for us to take that increased optimism and look at the playoff race in the West, Max.
That it is, David. That was fun. I can't believe. So we're actually experiencing one of the better Sun starts in a while, which is nuts.
It really is, and it often means playoffs. So let's get into it.
It often does. So let's look at the West playoff race. So we'll start with the locks. Then we'll go to the no chancers, and then we'll go to the contenders, of which one is our Phoenix Suns.
Mm-hmm.
The locks, David, you posted on Twitter a little earlier this week, and I agree with you. You had the LA teams, Houston, Denver, and Utah.
Yep.
I'm going to ask you real quick, which one of those you think, you called them locks, so obviously you think none of them are likely to fall, but what is the most likely to fall of those five?
Yeah, it doesn't look that way right now in the standings, but it did the other day, and it just kind of felt right to tweet that, because I definitely think they're the locks. I think they're all pretty much locks outside of injuries, and surprisingly, I'd go the two at the top. I'd go the Lakers and Houston, just because I think they're the most vulnerable in terms of one of their star guys or their one star guy going down. I think it's going to affect those teams the most, Max, and that's why I would actually say the Lakers and Houston to answer that question.
Yeah, I actually totally agree with you, and I think I would pick the Lakers, honestly, which sounds insane because how good they've been.
Yep.
But, the Clippers are getting vulnerable to not making the playoffs almost. Nuggets and Jazz kind of similar, so good. And then obviously, the Lakers, Davis or LeBron would be really bad for them. Let's go to the bottom. You had the Pelicans, the Grizzlies, the Warriors, and the Thunder. Is that right?
It is right. That's the four that come up at the bottom, not again at the moment, but did at the time when I took that little snapshot. The thing about those top teams is they're all crushing teams at home. The thing about all these bottom teams is they're all pretty poor away from home at the moment. And Golden State in particular, I think, is 2-9 in conference play against the rest of the West. So everyone's getting their revenge on Golden State this year, Max. But what do you think? Because there is one team for me in this that could push up to the bubble teams, but what do you think about any of these four potentially making a run? It is still early in the season, so you never know. Yeah,
I think we probably all have the same one. Everybody listening who follows this has the same one. It's definitely the Pelicans.
Yeah.
They got off to a very bad start, but, everyone and their mother knows that Zion Williamson is going to return for them at some point. They got a nice win also against the Clippers last night. With Drew Holiday, your guy, showing up. So maybe that's going to get them on a little bit of spark. Maybe they can get closer to...
And Favors.
Yeah. He was out for a while. You're right. So maybe they get closer to 500, at least a little more respectable by the time Zion comes back. And if Zion looked anything like Zion looked in the preseason, David, then the Pelicans may have a chance to make a run.
Yeah, their defense is woeful at the moment. I think 122.8 points per game the opposition is scoring on them. So, yeah, I guess much like the Suns, who have adjusted better, obviously, they that late news of Zion going out has really thrown them off a groove. And the guys that you thought they could count on were pretty poor to start the season, even though they maybe appear to be getting better now.
And I'll say that's probably a reason why they're still in the bottom, is that the fact their defense is bad, it's not a good sign, because Gentry's not known as a defensive coach, and Zion's, as a rookie, probably not going to be the most consistent defensive player, so there's not a whole lot of reason to think that'll get better. So I think there's a reason why we expect them to be in the bottom, David.
Yep, let's move on to the bubble teams, though, because that's where the real interesting conversation's going on, Max.
And it's where everybody who listens to this podcast wants us to talk about. So we have the Phoenix Suns, David. We have the Minnesota Timberwolves. We have the Dallas Mavericks, the San Antonio Spurs, the Sacramento Kings, and the Portland Trail Blazers. Do you see Let's start here. Do you see any kind of delineation between those teams like within their own tier?
Not really, and that's why I think it's really interesting at the moment that they're all bubbled up together. The thing that I'm really, I guess, focused on as a Phoenix fan right now is like what needs to happen with these teams, or what do we want to happen with these teams that benefits Phoenix. And I think, we are still early on in the season, and I think they're probably going to be the types of things, and luck's going to have a massive part to play in that maybe start to separate this group. So I don't know what thoughts you have on that, but I think you look at Minnesota, Cat cooling off, and this Wiggins spurt not being real would probably be good for the Phoenix Suns. Dallas not making a trade, and Porzingis continuing to be bad. I think he's shooting 40% from the field at the moment. The Spurs, there's little rumours and murmurs that they might trade DeRozan, which I think long-term would be a really good move, but would probably hurt them a little bit short-term to go all in on that youth that they have. Sacramento, you want them to keep struggling with Fox out, which currently they're not doing. And Portland, which you sneakily threw in earlier in the episode, just signed Melo. So the effect that he's had on teams in his later years in the NBA is probably exactly what you want it to happen for Phoenix's playoff chances here, Max.
Yeah, so I kind of do see a little delineation. That's why I threw that question at you.
All right, let's do it.
Well, I agree that these are the contenders. I do think Sacramento and Portland are kind of clearly to me the least likely to make the playoffs of this group.
Mm-hmm.
Sacramento, just because they got to try without De'Aaron Fox for a while. They've already been without Bagley. It just kind of feels like the season from hell for them. Maybe they rally. Maybe Bojan Bogdanovic goes nuts. I don't know. Maybe something happens. But it's Bogdan, right? I don't want to screw up the pronunciation of Eastern Europeans.
Yeah, you're right on that.
And Portland, I mean, they're already panic trading. I don't think it's actually, panic signing with Carmelo Anthony.
Yes.
I don't want to hate on it too much just because, they don't have anything else. They're signing him over Hazonia, so why the hell not?
Mm-hmm.
But it's really just more of a sign of how bad they are right now, that they view that as a possible Hail Mary. It's not good in Portland, guys. Portland, if they suffer one injury to McCollum or Lillard, the season's over. It's just done.
McCollum's not playing well either, really.
No.
They're really only afloat because Lillard has just been out of this world, and no one else is really giving anything right now. So, yeah, in terms of vulnerability, you've hit the nail on the head. Any kind of missed game time from Lillard, and they're just going to pile up the losses.
It'll be over for them. And I don't know if you've seen this yet, David. I have the scoreboard up. San Antonio lost to Orlando just now.
Ooh.
They're now 5-7 on the season. They had a kind of a hot start, which I think has covered up the fact that they've kind of been mediocre, and they've been losing a lot of games lately.
Yep.
I do think San Antonio, you got to give them the credit for being San Antonio. As you mentioned, the DeRozan trade could be something that happens for them, because I don't think they're going to want to re-sign him, and he may actually opt out because how bad free agency is next year.
Yep.
So that's a sneaky team that may just, maybe not really tank, but just play the young guys and just kind of, go that route. So I really view, kind of a Sacramento, Portland bottom tier, mini tier, a San Antonio middle tier, and I think Phoenix, Minnesota, and Dallas are kind of the top tier of this.
Let me throw this at you then, because I think it's awesome that we've mentioned the Spurs and Portland a lot, because my question is, who's most likely to be a lock come Christmas time and I guess make themselves a sixth team with those top five that we mentioned before? In years past, we probably by default would have gone with the Spurs or Portland just because of what they are as franchises. But I think you're right. They're not going to be in this conversation. And it probably is one of Phoenix, Minnesota, or Dallas. So if you had to put your house on it, Max, which one would you choose?
Such a good question. Honestly, I had to really think about this because all three of them, I see arguments for all of them. I see the Ayton comes back and Phoenix just looks ridiculous argument.
Yep.
I see the Wiggins keeps doing what he's doing and, Cat's cat and Minnesota argument. And then I see the Doncic with Porzingis, actually getting his crap together argument.
Yep.
Man, it's really, really hard, David. I think I'd go with Minnesota, actually. I buy the Wiggins thing. This is a Wiggins hater talking. I buy kind of what he's doing. It seems like the Ryan Saunders system's really benefited him. And then I just think Cat's probably the best player on any of these teams. Booker and Doncic, I'm sorry to you guys. I just think he probably is the most established, the most used to winning, and he's been in the playoffs. But, man, what do you think, Dave? That's a really good question.
I actually think it's Phoenix. I'm
Wow.
not really confident saying it given our past and not wanting to jinx things, but I kind of look at it very logically. They're all in the same group at the moment. They've all got pretty much the same record, and if you look at the numbers, are all doing very similar things. I kind of look at those swing assets or those things that need to happen for them to, I guess, go up a notch. And as we've discussed, it's Wiggins maintaining what he's doing. It's Porzingis not maintaining what he's currently doing, and it's Ayton coming back for Phoenix. And if you order those in the ones that you're most confident in, Ayton is coming back.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure I know what he's gonna do, if not better, and I'm probably underselling him. And if I compare that to banking on Wiggins with his 5 years in the NBA, or trusting a Porzingis who's looking scratchy, and guys typically take a long time, if not a whole season, coming back from those types of injuries. I'm not confident in any of them, but if I have to pick one, I think it's Phoenix.
Yeah, no, I think that you make a great argument, and I'm sure most of the NBA mainstream media would pick Dallas of that question.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting. I think ultimately, if I'm predicting what's actually going to happen, I think none of the three establish themselves as locks, but all three of them make the playoffs, David. I'm going to go ahead and say that right. I think Phoenix makes the playoffs, probably as the 8th seed. I kind of see your 5 locks, the LA, Houston, Denver, Utah, as being the top 5, and then in some order, Phoenix, Minnesota, and Dallas as the bottom 3 seeds. I would love to say Phoenix gets the 6th seed, because I think the 6th seed will avoid the LA teams. Probably. Well, maybe not. I think the Clippers maybe not. So let me ask you this, David.
Before you do, look at us trying to avoid first round playoff matchups.
I know. It's amazing, isn't it? I was hoping for the number 1 seed in the lottery the last couple of seasons. Unbelievable. But I want to ask you this, David. We're gonna get way the hell. We're gonna so far ahead of ourselves, insane. Which of those 5 locks, the LA teams, Houston, Denver, Utah, would you want to play in the first round of the playoffs?
Ooh, I love it. I very easily and quickly go to Utah.
Interesting. I have a different team. So you say why Utah first. I'll give you mine.
I just think star power. I hate star power in the playoffs. Rotations shrink. Guys get calls. Stars generally rise to the occasion. So, I'm going to be scared of Harden, LeBron, Anthony Davis, even Jokic, and Paul George and Kawhi. It's not an easy pick out of all 5 teams, but I'm just going to go with Utah because I think you can manipulate them a little bit. And I saw my national team manipulate particularly Rudy Gobert in the World Cup. So I do believe there's things that you can do to make their top guys less effective in the playoffs.
Yeah, especially with the shooting that some of our top guys, big guys have, it could be interesting in that matchup. I had Denver just because I saw Denver last season, and I thought they were kind of embarrassing in the playoffs.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I see your argument for Utah. I think it's clearly one of those two, right? It's not the LA teams or Houston. That is not what you want to see.
Interestingly, with the two, Utah is 6-0 at home, so that's not great for a 7-game playoff series where you don't have home court. And surprisingly, small sample size, but Denver are 4-1 away from home at the moment, which wouldn't be great for playoff time either. So the Clippers are 1-4 away, so maybe that's who we should be choosing.
Yeah, well, the Clippers also haven't had a single game with Paul George and Kawhi Leonard yet, so I'm not picking them real quick. But
just to finish, Max, speaking of jumping far too ahead, I've had a lot of people tweeting at me on Phoenix lost tonight and such won, or vice versa, and I'm just not going to care about individual night wins and losses with a lot of these teams, at least just yet. But shout out to our good friend Chris Koffel, who pointed out before January 1 we play at Sacramento, at Minnesota, versus Dallas, versus Minnesota, versus the Spurs, versus Portland, at Sacramento, and at Portland. So that's 8 games before the new year even kicks in, Max, against these bubble teams that we're in the same group with, and they become those double points types games against the teams that you're competing with, because a win to you and a loss to their column, it is a double win.
This will probably come back to bite me, but give me all the Sacramento and Portland games, please. Give me all of them right now in this stretch.
Yeah.
Last thing I want to point out is, because you brought up the potential series. Could you imagine the grudge match and the grudge war on Twitter if the Utah and the Phoenix Suns match up in the first round?
It would really, it would at least decide everything for 12 months until something else happens again. Like, that'll be the final thing. No matter how bad the numbers look for one or the other, it'd be like, yeah, but Phoenix beat Utah in a playoff series, so conversation over.
Phoenix beating Utah in a playoff series in which Devin Booker dominates Donovan Mitchell would maybe be the end of it for me. I would just be done. That's all I need.
Can no one point out on Twitter or tweet at us about how negative we are after the last 10 minutes we've just had on this podcast, Max? Because it's total BS.
We're talking about first-round matchups in the playoffs. Unbelievable. But I think that's probably it, David. Are we ready for 7 seconds or less?
Yep, I believe it's my turn. If you want to quickly run through the rules.
Yes, 7 seconds or less is the segment where one of us asks the other 3 questions for which the other only has 7 seconds or less to answer and has not prepared. David, what you got for me?
I have a wedding-themed 7 seconds or less for you this week to commemorate your celebration last week. So here it goes. Question 1. If you could pick 3 past or present sons to be your groomsmen, who would you choose and which one would be your best man, Max?
Oh, wow. Okay, well, Kelly Oubre's there just for the party. The bachelor party.
He's going to make you look bad, though. He's going to make you look bad.
Nah, it's fine. He'll be the fun guy. He'll put himself down to make me look better. It'll be great. I'm not worried about it. You got to bring Chuck. I mean, how fun is Chuck on the bachelor party and you know, all the groom's activities? You have to have Chuck.
Love it.
And then, you know, Steve Nash. Yeah, come on. That's not who. Oh wait, I just left out Devin Booker. Oh god, he's too young.
Best man out of those 3?
Chuck. Come on.
Yeah, love it. All right, question 2. Which past or present broadcaster, it can be Suns or otherwise, would you pick to MC your wedding?
I mean, I'd be thrown off the podcast if I didn't say Al McCoy, right?
Yep. Yeah, that was an obvious one. I wondered whether you'd throw someone else at me that I hadn't thought of, but that is a pretty obvious one, I think. Number 3, the old wedding tradition is something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue, Max. If you had one move to make to upgrade this current Suns team, which one would you choose? Would you go something old, which is to grab a past Suns player and put him on this team? Would you go something new and fast forward a current Suns player to his full potential? Would you go something borrowed and trade for a player from another team? Or would you go something blue, which is fans being sad about Deandre Ayton being out, and automatically reinstate him for the next game? Max, what is your decision?
Good, man. I get 7 seconds for this? I guess I gotta go something borrowed and just grab Giannis, right? That seems like the obvious answer.
Yeah, fair enough.
That's the easiest way to make us really good very fast, so I'll go with that.
All right. We can probably fit a package of Tyler Johnson's expiring and Frank and Dario.
And whatever the hell else Milwaukee wants.
Exactly. But that's it, Max.
Please, as always, everybody, rate, review, and subscribe. We really appreciate it. Follow me at MaxMCC11. Follow David at The 4 Point Play. Those are Twitter handles, everybody. David, anything else?
No new reviews, which is not surprising because we haven't podcasted for a bit. But if you like this one, feel free to join the 105 5-star reviews that we've got now, Max, which is really good. And shout out to if you're listening and gave us 1 star and added to our 1-star rating. Shout out to you, whoever did that. But I did want to give a special mention to guys listening on YouTube. Dale, Chris, Devante, and Stephen T have all been checking out the pod on YouTube, which always surprises us, and even leaving comments on the episodes, which is cool to see, Max. Upcoming busy week: Boston, Sacramento, the Pelicans, and Minnesota. And thanks for everyone to coming back with us after our little break. And don't forget to send me your votes for week 4.
Please do, and if you needed impetus to review us, please review us with your quick summary of which first round matchup you want to see the Suns have and why.
Love it. We'll read them out next week.
Thanks, everybody.